Do you know what people will find out about you when they look you up online? We live in a world where everything is on an internet platform. It's not so much cradle to grave, but actually womb to grave at the moment, because it starts with expectant mothers putting photos of their ultrasound scans onto Facebook and sharing those, and then sharing photos and videos of their children's performances and activities. The first step. Children's lives now are completely documented online. And this goes all the way to beyond the grave, because certainly sites like Facebook now have the facility to maintain your Facebook profile as a memorial profile that members of your family can administer. So we really are in an age where there is no getting away from it. And there is quite an interesting quote that I found, and I'll just let you read that one. So it is fantastic that we have the internet at our disposal to achieve all of these things, to promote ourselves, to promote our businesses. But it does come with certain risks. Now, there was a lady, trying to think of her name now, which has gone, Paris Brown. Do you remember the story about Paris Brown and the Kent police, and she was going to be a youth commissioner, and she ended up having to resign because of things she had tweeted about 4 years previously when she was 13. This has been in the news again this week because they have now appointed a new police youth commissioner, and they have apparently undergone extensive on and offline screening. In the news this week as well, there are some lenders in America that are now using social media profiles and activities to pre-screen borrowers beyond credit checking. So they're looking at what people are doing online. They're even going as far as looking at their activities on dating sites, which is pretty scary, really, when you think about it. And again, in the news this week, a hospital in Staffordshire has announced a proposal for consultants to start screening patients via Skype to reduce the waiting times by up to 35%. The world we live in is changing. It's changing phenomenally. I was saying to Junaid earlier on, when I came here in 1990 to start my undergraduate course, I didn't know how to switch a computer on. The height of technology I'd had, hi there, the height had been an electronic typewriter. And here we are where everything is digital, everything is online for everybody and all to see. So what will they find when they look for you? The first thing I'd like to see is just how connected we are on the internet in this room, to get a feel for where you're at, how big your digital footprint is, because I know that mine, because I do social media, because I promote myself as a sole trader, my digital footprint is huge. So it's quite scary having to manage that, making sure that you are on top of what's out there about you. But some digital footprints are not. And that can also be a disadvantage, because people will Google you if they want to go into business with you before they come into a meeting. I know that Phil contacted me on LinkedIn yesterday and we connected before I came here. So people will look you up before you have a meeting with them, and people will certainly look you up before you go for a job with them. So whether you're an undergraduate, whether you're a postgraduate here, or whether you're even staff, your footprint is important, and the brand that you project for you as an individual is really important. So let's have a look. Have you all got a piece of paper that looks a bit like this? Need one. Okay. What I need you to do is actually interact. Oh, have you got two? Has everybody got one now? What I'd like you to do, because it's the end of a day, I'd like you to get up on your feet and move around a little bit. So, on here you have room for 3 people's answers, and I'd like you to move around the room, rather than just asking the people next to you, please, and find out which of these platforms 3 people you speak to are on. And if there are ones that I haven't listed, because it's not an exhaustive list, then just write them at the bottom. And then when you've done that, count how many ticks you have. So off you go. Let's find out then the results of that. So first of all, I've already had it pointed out to me that I didn't miss quite an important one off. Skype wasn't on the bottom of that. Any others that I missed off that people are on? WhatsApp, yeah, absolutely. And I use it as well. It's a great way for my mother to keep tabs on me all the time because we live in different countries for absolutely no cost. So maybe I'm not too impressed with that, but yeah, I do use it. Any others at all?
What about Snapchat?
Yeah, Snapchat again, yeah, absolutely. Lots of teenagers in particular use that one. So there are lots and lots, and not just teenagers, obviously. So there are lots of sites. So how many ticks? Who has more than 36 ticks on there? Show of hands. No? Okay. Between 20 and 36? Show of hands. 1? Okay. 20 exactly. Okay, so between 10 and 19. Okay, so everybody else under 10 ticks then, yeah? So that would mean that you're probably, as a whole, as a group, not displaying a huge digital footprint, which is fine because it means that you're at a point where you can start controlling it before it becomes absolutely huge. So some of the things that I'll be talking to you about today will help you increase that presence that you have online as well as managing what's already there. Now, please tell me it's not just me. Show of hands, who Googles themselves occasionally? Thank you. Phew, I thought it was just me. You have to know what's happening, don't you? You have to know what's being said about you. So I Googled myself yesterday on a browser that I don't normally use just to see what comes up. And I actually Googled myself by name, which is quite different, of course, to Googling yourself by your topic of expertise, for example. But just to give you an idea of the size of my digital footprint, this is just page 1 of Google coming up. And incidentally, some research that I looked at by pcadvisor.co.uk confirmed what we already know, but put a figure on it, that 94% of internet searches never go beyond page 1 of Google. So people just don't look beyond that, but that's the figure, 94%. So what's on page 1 of Google and what it says about you is really important. So this is what page 1 of Google says about me. So I'm all over it, absolutely all over it. And I've gone on and I think I found about 4 or 5 pages before other people started creeping in with similar names, which is a little bit scary. But that's what comes of doing social media marketing and being online a lot to promote yourself. And what you can see on there is a variety of items. So you've got my LinkedIn profile there. The first thing that comes up is my happiness speaker website. Then there's some images. Why is there somebody there that's clearly not me? It's because I was interviewed on BBC Radio Sheffield and she was the presenter of the latest interview. So that went on a podcast, YouTube video, my author profile on Goodreads, my Facebook profile, which is very public because of what I do, because I use it for networking, and my Twitter profile. This is one that actually was quite interesting to find because when I started doing presenting and stuff, I'd registered on that website, and that's going to take quite a while now to come off, but it's no longer relevant. There's nothing bad on there, it's just no longer relevant, and it also says that I'm about 3 years younger than I am, which is perhaps not such a bad thing. And then look at that, right at the bottom here, alumni profiles. So when you're thinking about what you're doing when you're leaving here, it's also important to think about things like your alumni profile, because being listed on the University of Bradford School of Management, it's a very prominent site, it ranks well, so it's going to help your Google rankings. If perhaps you're entrepreneurial and you're going to set up your own business and that profile links to your business, again, that's a high-ranking link to your business. So all of these things are worth bearing in mind. So that's the obvious one, Googling yourself. What about setting up Google alerts? Anybody done that? One person here? So if you go to Google and / it with alerts, and I do have some handouts with some of these links on for you as well that you can take at the end. But obviously, so most of the websites I mentioned should be on here, but feel free to take notes, of course. If you set up a Google alert with your name, every time anything gets posted with your name online, it could be a YouTube video, it could be one of your friends, you've been on a night out and they've taken some photos and name tagged you on them, they've filmed you and stuck it on YouTube. It could be a newspaper article that you don't know you were mentioned on. Any of those things. I was a speaker at an event a couple of weeks ago, and I had no idea that I'd been picked as one of the names in a newspaper article, and then up it popped. And I thought, well, that's great. There were probably about 10 speakers at the event, and my name was one of the 2 that was mentioned in the article, but nobody had told me, and that's a good thing. You can use that for promotion. So finding out what people are saying about you by setting up Google alerts for your name is not just about protecting yourself, but it's also about promoting yourself and finding out the good things that people are saying about you. If you haven't got a Twitter account and somebody is tweeting about you, they might mention you by name. If you've got a Google alert, you'll find that. And another even better way of finding that is Topsy. Anybody here heard of Topsy? Okay. Topsy.com, again, looks at your social influence, looks at the activities that are going on, but it does so primarily on Twitter. So if you look at a typical Topsy response there, you can select the duration that you want to, look at. You can also have a look at how many tweets in that duration and the overall score, which is a sentiment score. So the higher, the better, the more positive it is. And you can filter it by links and just general tweets, photos, videos, etc. And you can even look on here at influencers. So the people that are most influential on Twitter that are talking about you. So again, there were people that commented on an event that I'd been speaking at, but they hadn't tagged me, they hadn't used the @ sign on Twitter, so I didn't know that they'd done that, and if I hadn't looked on that, I couldn't have gone back and said, oh, thank you very much, and that's lovely. So it does help to do that. Now this is something that I've put in, not because I'm narcissistic, but just because it was something I discovered in my research, because new stuff keeps coming about, and there are so many applications now that can mine information about you that's available on all sorts of sources, including, for example, Facebook. How many of you have a Facebook profile? Okay, so most of you, and those of you who have, you might have realized in the last few weeks, it might have been a month or more now, the time flies, but when Facebook had their big anniversary and everybody got a special video, yeah? So the information is there, and you can get that. The scary bit is, have you ever wondered why you're getting adverts that are targeted very specifically at things you've been talking about? And that's not just on Facebook, it's on Google. If you're using Gmail, they're popping up in your email program. There is software out there that will just mine everything you're putting on the internet, and marketers can use that. And they can't get at your specific information. So for example, on Facebook, they can get at your Facebook email addresses, which Facebook issues to everybody, or at your Facebook user IDs, which are completely anonymous to the outside user. They wouldn't know anything other than an ID. But they can actually use that and create marketing campaigns. So they can look at, for example, competitor pages, look at the likes for those pages, look at the people who've commented on those pages, who are active and sharing their content, and they can then mine that information out, take out the user IDs, input them into the Facebook advertising platform, and target adverts specifically at those audiences who are already interested in their topic. So all the information is out there. And because it can be a little bit scary, I thought I'd look at something a bit nicer that's not so scary. And Intel, the makers of the microchips, of course, have created this site, Museum of Me. And you can just go on and log on with your Facebook profile. And it doesn't seem to save it because I've gone back on the same browser and it's asked me to log in again, so it's just a one-off. And it creates a little video of your life, but it does it in a really cool way, so I thought I'd just put that on there. So there you go. So those of you with Facebook accounts, you can go back and have a go at that, and it'll create your very own museum of you, and if you give it permission, it will create a photo album of the museum of you in your Facebook account as well, so that you can share that with other people. There are a couple of other sites that you can use that are a little bit less well known in terms of finding out what's out there about you. And they really do dig quite deep into old and obsolete profiles, which can be quite useful if you want to find out old profiles where you might have set yourself up somewhere and forgotten about it and they're no longer relevant. So I'm not quite sure how I'm supposed to pronounce it. I think it's supposed to be people.com. So if you go on people.com and put your name in, it will start doing a little bit of a search and find out all the social media, all the online profiles that exist for you. Clearly not all of them might be you. If you've got a name that's not that uncommon, then it might be other people as well. But that's, again, useful to know, because it might be that there's somebody with the same name as you that's got some rather dodgy profiles, and it's good if you know that in advance, just so that when people look you up, you're actually aware of the situation. And when you go on people.com, it then actually tells you, well, if you want to dig deeper, you can go to Spokeo as well. And you can set up your profile. It's absolutely free. And you go on there and it really digs and it starts looking at all your different social media and web activities. So do it and hopefully not get scared, but it's quite an interesting one to do. So the key thing is, if you are going to have a big digital footprint, and most of us are going to have a bigger and bigger one as we go along, it needs to be the right one. It needs to tell the story that you want to tell people about you. And that doesn't mean reinventing yourself to be something you're not, but it does mean making sure that you haven't got inappropriate content out there, especially if you're in business, if you're looking for a job, etc. And one of the ways to have a really positive brand, a really positive digital profile out there, is to proactively use the internet to position yourself as an expert. And there are lots of ways that you can do that. For example, you can blog not just on your own platform, but you can guest blog on authoritative platforms. So that, for example, is a blog post that I wrote for the School of Management about 6 months ago now, I think. It's there now. It's there forever and ever. So if people Google, in that particular case, the circular economy and social media, that will pop up and will position me as an expert in that field. So that's one of the ways you can do that. And there are always sites willing to welcome guest bloggers. So within your studies, within your work, you all have different areas of expertise. Yes, it's the School of Management, but your expertise may be more within the law, it may be more within HR, it may be marketing, it may be finance. So you can position yourself as an expert. And you can do that while you're studying. You can blog all over the place if you've got an opinion on something. The other way to do that is to comment in LinkedIn groups, as well as Facebook groups, but LinkedIn particularly for professional reasons. So this is the School of Management LinkedIn page, and I've just picked up a couple of the posts that went on there quite recently. By having that visibility, you're really getting the power of LinkedIn and what LinkedIn can do for you. LinkedIn, yes, you need to have a really good, solid profile. The LinkedIn profile feeds fantastically into Google searches, Bing searches, and so on. But actually, the real power of networking on LinkedIn is to go into the groups and to become visible and to be an expert that answers questions and interacts with people. It's a networking platform. Google Plus. How many of you have a Google Plus profile? 1, 2, okay, just under half. So Google Plus, it's a bit of a no-brainer really. It's owned by Google. So even if you don't do an awful lot with it, do something with it and do positive things with it. Comment on topics that are going to position you as an expert. +1 topics, that's a bit like saying like, a thumbs up on Facebook, on topics that are going to position you as an expert. Share that content. And if you've done a guest blog, share it across all of those platforms at different times and make sure that you do share it on Google+, because that will, even though Google keep getting told off for prioritizing their own platforms over others in search results, they seem to still find a way to do that. So YouTube results always rank really highly, as well as Google+ results. And then there are specialist forums and specialist websites. So for example, HR Zone is a site dedicated to HR professionals where they can go and ask questions and interact and find out about new legislation. But there are also guest blogging opportunities on there. So on there is a list, for example, of some of their latest guest blogs. It's again an opportunity to network. And on the subject of specialist sites, before we had Facebook, before we had Google+, there was this thing called forum boards, messaging boards. And I'm seeing a few nods. They still exist. They haven't disappeared. What used to happen with messaging boards, and to some extent LinkedIn groups still work on the same principle, is that somebody would start off a topic, and then somebody would reply to that topic, and somebody else would reply to that reply, and you would have a discussion going on about a particular topic, and then somebody would start a different topic, and they would be grouped in certain topic areas. What's happened now to forum boards, to discussion boards, is that they've become a lot more specialist. So you have discussion boards about the area that you live in, where people talk about all sorts of things that you can do in that area and business in that area. You have discussion boards about very specialist technical topics, as well as business in general. There are all sorts of specific forum boards, so it's worth searching for those. Wherever your area of expertise is, look for those discussion boards. Just Google. So if it's HR, for example, UK HR discussion boards, and find the boards that you can take part in. You can register. Most of them are free to register with. You can have a profile quite often. With each post that you put on, you're allowed to have a little footer that perhaps has a link to your website or to some of your social media profiles. So each time you post, you're propagating the news and the brand that is you as somebody who's employable, or somebody to do business with, or somebody to interact with in a business capacity or in a learning capacity. So then that brings us to LinkedIn, of course, which is the professional network, the one that was originally created specifically for business networking and not just as a social platform. And it still has retained that status. It's not a social platform as such. There are things that you can do with your LinkedIn profile just to make sure that you come up in people's search results. And I am now going to put myself on the spot. Have you found me? Excellent. Fantastic. I was getting a bit worried then. I was thinking, why can't I be found on LinkedIn? Brilliant. So there are things that you can do to be found, and it's not just about your name, because remember that people won't necessarily be looking for you by name if they don't know who you are. And that goes for whether you're an individual or a business, but they might be looking for what you do, for what you can do for them. And that's what you need to make sure stands out on there. It's not just relevant within LinkedIn, it's relevant within any search on the internet. LinkedIn in particular is very powerful at feeding through into search engine search results. So you saw, I think my name came up, was it the second item on Google page 1? If you Google my name, was my LinkedIn profile. So it does rank really highly. So you need to make sure that your keywords are in there. So not to pick on anyone, I've had a look, and there's Junaid Khan. And you'll notice he has a very descriptive job title underneath his name. Now, in Junaid's case, his job title pretty much describes what he does. So that's absolutely fine. If your job title, however, is director, CEO, putting that on there will do nothing for your search results. Nobody is going to go on Google or on LinkedIn to look for whatever your area of specialty is and put, I want to find a director. Even if they're looking to recruit a director, they're going to say what kind of expertise that they want that director to have. So if that's the case, don't use your job title, use what you do rather than who you are, and use that as your strap line under there. And make sure you populate your profile with your education, with the jobs you've done, everything that will help people get a really full picture of who you are, what you're about, but also it will all feed into keywords. Underneath the main profile information, where you've got your name and your current job, there's an area that tends to collapse in and you have to open it up, which is your contact details. It used to be a lot more obvious. They've made it slightly less obvious now to fill in. But that area allows you to put website links, which can be to your own website, or it can be to somewhere where you've guest blogged, or to your own blog, or something you're interested in that you want to point people in, but use that space. And you can also put social media profiles on there, such as your Twitter account. And you can put multiple Twitter accounts on if you have more than one, like me, and select which one you want to be your main one to tweet to if you're sharing on Twitter as well as on LinkedIn at the same time. So make sure that you use that profile area. Testimonials. LinkedIn's gone a bit silly with all those recommendations where people that don't know what you do or who you are can just click a button because LinkedIn asks them to and say, yes, this person is an expert on this. Somebody started saying that I was an expert on copywriting. What was that, sorry? Juggling, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All sorts of random stuff's coming up, just because it might have picked up the word in your profile somewhere. So I mostly ignore that area, but real testimonials written by people for you are still very valid. Employers look at those, and in fact I was speaking to a friend of mine the other day who recently started a new job, and the interview process for this job was ridiculous. I've never heard anything like it. They had to turn up at 5:26 p.m. and if they weren't there within a 6-minute window, they were sent away, and there was all sorts of weird and wonderful, so they were very rigorous. And he'd given a lot of thought to his testimonials and who he was going to give as referees. And then he started the job, and he found out that nobody had actually contacted his referees. He thought, that's odd. After all this rigor, after all this stressful process and every test they've put us through. So he asked the question, why haven't you contacted my referees? And they said, well, we didn't need to, because all the people whose details you gave us had written you very good testimonials on LinkedIn. We know who those people are, we know their profile, we've checked them out. We don't need to bother them again, because they've already given you a testimonial. So testimonials on LinkedIn are really important. And the one thing that we're really bad at doing generally as people, and I think particularly because we're quite reserved in the UK, is to ask. If you've done a job for somebody, if you've worked on a project even in your course with somebody, ask them. Say, right, you've just told me that I've done a great job here. Could I ask you to send me a testimonial on LinkedIn? And make it easy for them to do so. Because it's happened to me before where I've asked somebody for a testimonial on LinkedIn and it's ended up going against the wrong job. And then you don't want to go back and say, oh, actually, great testimonial, wrong place though. So tell them you're going to ask them, and then when you do, request it via the Ask for a Recommendation section, which is under your settings in LinkedIn, and select the job for which you want a testimonial. And then select the person or people that you want the testimonial from and write them a personalized message to back up the fact that you've already asked them for that testimonial. And when you see them again, if they haven't done it, ask them again. Say, you know, could I just remind you, I know you're busy, but... And get those testimonials. And try to get them spread out across your different jobs. The other thing that your LinkedIn profile allows you to do is it's gone all multimedia. You can now put videos against certain sections of your profile. And those of you who have looked at mine will see that one of the videos on there is very random. I was on Britain's Best Dish. I was really proud of that. Great, great, because I was trying to get attention as a presenter, etc. And because I do a cookery blog, it's still quite relevant. Some fantastic people on that show who were judges who said that my tiramisu was unbeatable and fantastic. So I want that video on there. And you can do that. You can show off your videos. And videos don't just have to be of people. So the ones that you can see on the screen there, one is a Prezi online presentation. Anybody used Prezi? One person, okay. Prezi can make people a little bit dizzy, but it's a great way of putting presentations online and taking them with you anywhere. And if you do use the free platform, you have no option but for them to be public. So create presentations about your area of expertise and just put them on there and keyword them and they will come up. And then you can use them on your LinkedIn profile as well. And the other one is an animation that I got somebody to do for me about the services I offer in social media marketing. So again, it doesn't have to be you in front of a camera. It doesn't have to be people. You can use animations. And very recently, something else cropped up on LinkedIn, which is organizations. You can now say in a particular job, other organisations that you've been involved with and worked on projects on. So it might not be an employer, but, and I think this is particularly relevant in a setting where you're within a university, because you might be doing research projects, etc., with organisations, either other academic organisations or even with industry. And you can now list those, and they don't come up as your employers, they come up as organisations that you've worked with in some capacity, and you can put that detail on there as well. And if you've got projects that you're collaborating with other people on, you've got the projects facility on there as well that you can put on. So lots and lots of ways to demonstrate your expertise on LinkedIn. And then once you've got a really complete profile, get really busy in the groups so that people, when they look at your profile, get an understanding of what you're about. And your interests. Do put some real interests on there, of course, but actually use that as a way to keyword your profile again. So if you're all about finance for small businesses, then put that you're really passionate about finance for small businesses. It'll help the keywording and it will help people to find you. So then Google+, we've talked about Google+ briefly, because it can look quite alien to some people. I'll just mention a few things. So I've picked out somebody who's very good at marketing and social media, Richard Branson. And he's all over his social media profile. He's really active. And I love what he does because it's not just about business. He's got a bit of the personal touch. He talks about his daughters. He talks about his holidays. And yes, he talks about business. And he gives real advice to people on social media as well. He writes great blog posts that people can actually take some information from. This is his Google+ profile. So on there, it gives you information about him, which is just background information. And the other area that you can use on your Google+ profile is the links. You might know by now, if you've been online quite a bit, that it's a good idea to have links to your websites, to your profiles, to your blog posts, etc., from authoritative platforms. Well, it doesn't get much more authoritative than Google. So having those links on there that link back to your other profiles is really useful. And the other section that is not completed for Richard Branson, but that you can also complete on your Google+ profile is contributor to. So if you have done guest blogs, if you've written articles for online magazines, that kind of thing, you can actually fill that in with a link directly to the content as well as a contributor rather than it being your own content. And then there is the posts page, which is quite similar to a Facebook page. You basically post your content on there. You can share things. You can like things, except it doesn't call it like. It calls it +1. But it works in a very similar way. You can share videos, other pages. You can write text in there. The main difference is that you select groups of people. It's what Google+ calls circles. So you can have something displayed to the whole of the public, or you can put individuals into circles, and it doesn't have to be a reciprocal agreement like a friendship on Facebook. You just find people that are interesting to you for whatever reason, and you put them in a circle. You can call the circle whatever you want. They will never know what the circle is that you've put them in. They will only know that you've put them in a circle. And then you can decide to share your content either with the whole of the general public or with specific individuals or even only with certain circles. Another addition to Google+ lately is that you can now, through the Gmail system, you can actually email people that are in your circles even if you're not in a reciprocal contact with them. You won't see their email address, but you can actually send them an email via Google. And how powerful is that if you put the right people into your circles? And then Twitter, how many people have a Twitter account? Okay, reasonable number of you. Twitter is fantastic for business. When Twitter first came out, even though I love technology, I love social media, and I was already involved in this field to some extent, I thought, 140 characters, what's that about? And who wants to know what I ate for breakfast? What a load of rubbish. That was really my thought, and it took me a long time. And then I discovered hashtags, and I thought, what? Hashtags? Ridiculous. But actually, the power of Twitter is phenomenal. For a short while, I ran a micro business making a food product. It was micro. I made it in my own kitchen. I did all the marketing. I took it out to various markets all over Yorkshire. Through Twitter, I ended up getting my product listed at Wheaton's in Harrogate, which, if anybody knows it, is a very prestigious retailer. I got a deli in Windsor, of all places, to stock my product, and a local small supermarket franchise as well. All through Twitter, because of the profile that I had on there, because of the interactions and the communications I had with people. So it really does work. Last week I was delivering a talk down in London at the BBC, and one of the great things about that talk, apart from the fact that it was the BBC, which was fab, was that I was able to invite a potential client from a business networking organisation aimed at execs to come and watch me speak, because they won't book you as a speaker unless they've seen you. How I got in touch with him was through Twitter. And I'd been looking and running searches for people who book speakers in a professional setting, who are looking for business speakers, found his profile, and I just sent him a cheeky tweet, and I said, "Are you looking for speakers?" As it happened, he was, so we were able to open that dialogue. So really don't underestimate the power of Twitter, because you can communicate with absolutely anybody on Twitter. And that's what it can do for you. So a couple of profiles I've picked out there. I look at a lot of tweets about happiness because it's one of the things I talk about. This is a lady called Brené Brown. She's an American. She talks about vulnerability. She's written some great books. And this is her Twitter profile. So you can see one of the things she's done is she's promoted her books down the side. And when you look at her activity, all the bits that you can't see very well because of the way that she's color-coded her profile in pale blue, they're all mentions of people. So what she's doing very, very well to raise her profile is to have conversations on Twitter, and that's what Twitter is fantastic for. It's not just about putting the content out there, but it's actually, you can interact with just about anyone, and she does a lot of that. And then the other person is Richard Wiseman, who's a positive psychology expert here within the UK. And again, very similar. He's got his books shown off on his profile. He's very conversational. But another thing that he also does is he has a regular Friday quiz tweet that goes out so that people are used to that and are following it as well. And he interjects quite a bit of his personal life and humour in there as well. So again, very conversational. And then another thing on Twitter, just like with any other social media presence that you have or any other online presence that you have, it's really important to think about the keywords that you put in your profile. So again, use that space. The bio, you have 160 characters. It doesn't seem like a lot, but you can put some really relevant content on there that's going to help you come up in search results. And again, remember, it's not just within that platform, but it's on Google as well. So make sure they're the right keywords as well that people find you for, and change them from time to time. So what other things can you do to brand yourself online? I've picked out a few for you. So you can blog. WordPress is now the most authoritative and simple to use blogging platform. You can go onto wordpress.com and set up an absolutely free blog. You can even attach your own domain name to it if you want to, instead of having .wordpress.com at the end. So if you have something to say, it's worth setting that up. You can even build it as a proper website with a blog section to it. Google loves blogs. A blog, every time you write a new blog post, is a new web page that provides content, and Google loves forever changing content. I do keep talking about Google because, yes, we have Bing and there's Yahoo and there's other search engines, but Google is still the #1 used search engine. And the principles that work for Google work in general for the others as well. Names. Somebody said to me, never heard of that one before when they saw it on the list. Names is a kind of social aggregation tool where you can log in with your LinkedIn profile and it'll pull through information from LinkedIn, which you can then edit if you want to change the wording a little bit, just so that Google is not looking at completely duplicate content. But what it does is, it says it on there really, it allows you to manage and to measure your social presence. So you can link all sorts of profiles that you have online and link them into your Names account, and it will find other people that you're already connected to, and it just kind of grows that web, but it makes sure that it grows it in a way that it's still in a very professional setting. Names is aimed more at professionals than anything else. Brand yourself. It does what it says on the tin, really. Similar to names, you can collect all your profiles and connect them on there, and it tells you ways that you can improve on your profile. And what Brand Yourself particularly does is it looks at Google Page 1 for you. And it allows you to review your Google Page 1 results and say, yes, this one's accurate, this one isn't. It can't actively change stuff, but what it can do is, based on what you're finding and what you feed back to it, make recommendations of things that you can do to improve the results on Google Page 1 for your personal brand. So that's quite a useful one. It does have paid levels that it keeps trying to promote to you, but you can actually do quite a lot with the free profile as well. And then Clout. Heard of Clout? Anyone? A couple of people, yeah. You might have noticed when I was looking at those Twitter profiles that there were some orange Ks against some of the names. You wouldn't normally get that, but you can get a browser extension, certainly on Google Chrome and on Firefox, and I think possibly on Internet Explorer as well now, that will display Clout scores for every tweet, for every person that you're looking at on Twitter. The Clout score, you will have one, whether you know it or not. If you've got a Twitter account, or you've got any kind of social media presence, but primarily Twitter, you will have a Clout score, and if somebody's using one of these tools to look at your Clout score, then they will see what it is. So you might as well make use of it and look at growing it. Without getting too hung up on this influence and online popularity, if you will, the reason for looking at your Clout score is because it measures influence. And the way it does that is if you put in all your other social media profiles, so it looks at Twitter and then it'll look at LinkedIn, and now I think that they've added Google+, and you can add your Facebook, either a business page or a personal profile. You can't have both. You've got to choose. So whichever you're most active in, whichever you get the most responses from, choose that. And what it will do is it will look at how people are interacting with you and how you're interacting with them. So it's looking not just at what you're putting out into the world, but it's looking at how people are responding to that. And that's its measure of influence. Are people replying to you? Are they liking your content? Are they sharing your content? And that gives it an idea of influence. So the higher your score, the more influential it sees you to be. Why is it important when other people are looking at that? Well, if they think you're influential because you've got a high Clout score, they're going to interact with you even more because they want you to interact with them to raise their influence. So that raises yours again. You can look at other people's Clout score and you can deliberately start interacting with influencers, people who have high Clout scores, people who have a presence online. And by doing so, you can raise your own presence and your own level of influence online, which will then feed back into search results, etc. So that's the Clout score. And then this is a new one that I've discovered recently. It's aimed at journalists primarily, Yatterbox. Again, it's a measure of influence, but what it does is you can search for a topic. So say you wanted to read up about sustainability in the UK and you want to see who the influencers are in the field of sustainability in the UK so that you can interact with them. You can put in your keywords into Yatterbox and it will find posts, articles, blog posts, news items, etc. by influencers. So politicians, journalists, people who have a lot of clout and influence online. It will look for those posts and it will then, you've then got the option of interacting with that. And one of the great ways of getting visibility online is, for example, to look for news articles that are influential, that a lot of people tend to relate to and interact with, and comment on those news articles. Somebody I know who is in the field of sustainability, he is always commenting on things on the independent online platform. And he's now getting little snippets of articles published, and he's starting to become that authority where when he replies to comments and to articles, they know who he is, they know that he's somebody influential, and people are paying attention. So that's helping him establish his niche and his credibility. And that's one of the things that you can do, and Yatterbox will just help you a little bit with that. And then there's lots and lots of other things. So we've talked about forums, message boards, discussion boards, making sure that you find the specialist ones that are relevant and interact on those. Book reviews. Book reviews come up on search results. So if you have an Amazon account and you've read a book, write a book review. Make sure that you do come across as a real person, so do write book reviews about fiction books that you read just for fun. But make sure, if you want to establish yourself as a platform of authority on a particular topic, read books about that topic and review them, because your reviews will come up online. Your reviews will actually come up in search results. Again, Goodreads is another platform. It's owned by Amazon, but it's purely a book reviewing platform, a place where people bookmark books that they want to read. Create yourself a reader profile on Goodreads. It's absolutely free. And review books that you've read, especially around your subject. And also mark books that you want to read around the subject, books that you, in the process of reading. It all helps enhance your presence. Talked about comments on articles and blogs. And Facebook. Now, I've not put much about Facebook on here because that's probably the platform. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, if I'm not interrupting.
No, that's fine.
Just while you were talking, some thoughts which I wanted to share. While in terms of a LinkedIn profile, quite clearly you need to have a structure of how you go about it. I feel that some of these forums like Facebook, as long as you keep it private, the point is that do you necessarily have to sanitize yourself in personal forums online? For instance, you were talking about, writing reviews.
Yeah.
Let's say I like Dust Capital. I'm just giving you a random example. And I write a review of that. And somebody thinks, I'm a communist. The point is, I feel that, yes, in LinkedIn, something like LinkedIn, quite obviously you need to have boundaries. But in some of the other forums like Facebook, I don't keep my forum public. It's private. But within that private forum, once somebody gets in there, I'm careful that somebody who's the current boss or something obviously wouldn't get in. But once someone gets in there, I'm quite free. I talk about my political views and so on. So one thing which kind of disturbs me of this whole perception management part of which you're talking about, while a lot of it is a necessary reality of our times, these are things which people have spoken about from Orwell in 1948, he wrote 1984.
Yeah.
And the Truman Show recently talks about this kind of, where, you control everything about you is, you're being watched and you control everything about you. So, at a core, I don't feel very comfortable about it. Maybe this is not the right forum to bring it up.
It's an interesting point, though, and I think it is. And that's why I started with, the internet and the possibilities that it gives us is both wonderful and also really awful, because everything is exposed. And yes, to some extent, nothing is private anymore, because you're talking about, and I will talk about protecting your profiles and how to do that as well for some people who might not know how to go about that. But actually nothing is private. If you send somebody a text message and say you're really angry at something that's happened and you send that text message, they can take a screenshot on their phone and they can post it all over social media. If you put something on your private Facebook profile that you have a very tight group of friends that you let in and nobody else gets to see that, well, that's great. But one of those friends might decide to become spiteful and take a screenshot of something and share it. So whilst they can't share it within the platform because it's protected, nothing is there to stop them from taking a screenshot. Same thing with emails. People can print them, people can take screenshots, people can forward them. So nothing is actually absolutely private, and I think the one thing that unfortunately we do have to bear in mind is that everything you put out there is potentially available for public consumption. Like you, I'm not entirely sure I'm comfortable with that. Unfortunately, it seems to be the way that the world is working. And in fact, we're now talking about the Internet of Things. We're talking about fridges and cars and TVs and heating systems and lights all talking to each other. And, are they going to go off and talk about you elsewhere and about your heating habits? Are they going to report you because you're not green enough in the way that you heat your house? Who knows? We don't know where it's going to go, but I agree, it does feel a little bit uncomfortable. And that's why, to some extent, really, you have to be very vigilant about what you put out there. And it's just the way it goes. But a very valid point, absolutely. Thank you. So yeah, Facebook. you can protect yourself, of course. It's designed as a friendship platform. What I've found more and more through business networks and through what I do as work, that a lot of entrepreneurs and business people in general are actually now opening it up an awful lot. It has become a mixture of private and business. People connect on Facebook with business contacts and interact on there. And in fact, one of the biggest, most active groups that I'm on Facebook is the Professional Speaking Association. There are so many posts going on there every day. Maybe unsurprising because we're all speakers and we like to verbalize what we have to say, but it's so active and it's an open platform and it's a business platform, so everybody's using their personal profiles on Facebook to interact on that platform. So the lines have become blurred. And some of the things you can do is to actually look at, okay, you can have global settings that decide whether your posts are private or public or who you're sharing them with, but then you can also control it at an individual level. And it works a bit like the circles on Google+, so you can put people on Facebook into groups of your own making, into categories, so that you can say, well, actually, this particular post I only want to share with this very small group of people. This post I want to share publicly, etc. This one I want to only post to my professional networks because maybe your friends and family are getting fed up with you talking about work stuff all the time. So there are ways that you can do that, but again, bearing in mind the conversation we've just had, nothing is completely private. I've put Google Alerts there again because I talked about Google Alerts in the context of searching for content about yourself. But if you're looking to position yourself as an authority on a particular topic, then as well as all the other things we looked at and the Yatta box, etc., a Google Alert is a really simple way of finding content and sharing that content. So you can have Google Alerts popping into your inbox either as events happen or once a day or once a week. If you're talking about social media, I would recommend once a day at least. And have them pop into your inbox with anything that it finds that Google has found, whether it's YouTube content, whether it's articles, whether it's blog posts, etc., anything at all that brings up those keywords. So you can then use those to share the content, to comment on it, etc. So it's another way of monitoring your subject area. Right, so we've talked a lot about your personal brand, but the other thing that I just wanted to touch upon today as well is how you can use the internet and its power to actually develop yourself professionally and personally. So for example, you can use the internet, of course we know, to job search. So you've got generic job boards, and there are so many out there. There's the big ones. You've got JobSite, Monster, CV Library, etc. But then you can also go and dig a bit deeper and look at specialist job boards. So if you're looking for your next directorship after your MBA, for example, you can look for director job boards, and there are job boards that specifically cater to HR, job boards that cater to sales roles, marketing roles, etc. So you can look out for those. And again, you do that through Googling and you'll find them. But then there are so many of them that life gets a little bit tricky. You could spend all your time just Googling all those job boards and looking them up and getting your profiles on all of them. And what you can actually do is, has anybody heard of Indeed.co.uk? A couple of people, yeah. So you can get onto Indeed and you can set yourself, just like Google Alerts, you can set yourself up with job searching alerts, and they'll land in your inbox and it will mine most of the platforms that are out there for jobs. And you can now also load your CV onto Indeed as well and build yourself a profile on there. So it does take a little bit of the time element out of it and make your life a little bit easier. Not every single job board will aggregate into Indeed, but it's certainly worth having that as a starting point. And then again, LinkedIn, it keeps coming back to LinkedIn, but people can advertise jobs on LinkedIn. So search for jobs on LinkedIn and you might find positions that you're interested in. And especially if you're interested potentially in international positions, then LinkedIn can be quite good for that. But I do keep coming back to this because it's so, so important. And I know of people who have got jobs on the strength of their activities on LinkedIn because they've positioned themselves as an expert and people have noticed them. So not only is it a useful networking tool, it's not only a great tool for doing business, but it's also a really useful tool to make sure that the right people notice you if you're looking for a job. And certainly, when I was in recruitment, recruiters were all over LinkedIn. We would scour the groups to find the right people. We would join groups just to make sure that we were in the right circles. To some extent, employers have now taken that over and are cutting the recruitment agencies out an awful lot as well. So employers are very definitely using LinkedIn to search for people, and if they can do it without paying, they will do. So if they can do it without paying, it means they won't pay for a job advert, they will just be searching profiles and they'll be looking for group activities. So make sure that your profile displays the right qualities for employers. And then you can use the internet as well for learning activities. Now at the moment, you've got probably all the learning you want available here. But when you leave your course, you will want to keep developing. You will want to do a certain number of hours of continual professional development, and depending on the profession you're in, you might have to do that. Certainly, if you're in HR, you've got the CIPD, you've got to do a certain number of hours. When I was in recruitment and I was a member of the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, I had to do 20 hours a year, and I had to evidence that. And part of that can be stuff that you find online. So you can attend webinars, whether they're paying webinars or whether they're free ones. There's an awful lot of information out there. You can also look at blog posts that people have written on particular topics to aid your research, and you can do that while you're here, while you're writing assignments and working on projects and research. You can use all of that information as well. YouTube videos. Again, a friend of mine told me recently, I found this quite scary, that his brother, who is not a builder or an architect, has built his new house from start to finish off the back of YouTube videos. And he's managed to get all the planning permissions and everything because YouTube videos told him how to do this. I'm not entirely sure how comfortable I would feel going into that house, but it has passed all the regulations, and he's done it. And he's done it at a fraction of the cost because the YouTube videos were there showing him how to do it. Clearly he had some skill. You do need that, but it just goes to show that whatever you are looking for, there will be a YouTube video showing you how to do it. One of the most searched for terms on YouTube is how to, followed by whatever people are looking for. So, and again, feeding that the other way, if you want people to find your content on YouTube, if you can create how-to videos and keyword them with the phrase how to, then you're more likely to be found. Again, you can look at online articles, and of course there's Wikipedia, which is hit and miss, and you can look at things like SlideShare presentations and Prezi presentations and all of the content that's out there. The one thing I would say is that anybody can put absolutely anything on the internet, so if you're using that for learning purposes, if you're using it to develop yourself or to research something, double check it, triple check it, find multiple sources that are independent of each other, and see whether they concur and whether they're giving you the same information, just to make sure that you're right. One of the key things, for example, in my profession as a speaker, is if I'm going to use a famous quote, and you can find multiple variations of that famous quote online, so it's making sure that you dig down and get the right one so that you're not misquoting, and the same goes for any kind of research that you're going to do, or any kind of learning and development that you're going to use the internet for. And then it comes down to protecting yourself and making sure that all of this that's happening, all of that activity that you're putting out there, that you are protected. Identity theft happens. It happened to me last week. And I'm not sure whether it happened because of being online, because I've been a company director, so it's very easy to find my name and address, or certainly was for a while, or whether some items of post were stolen, people got my name and address that way. But it does happen. And the scary thing was when I phoned the police, when I reported it, etc., how common I was told that it was and how many people it happens to. So I was quite lucky. I didn't actually have any money stolen from my bank account, but somebody decided to start taking out a load of little payday loans in my name, and I started getting letters threatening to send bailiffs around to my house, which is not a pleasant experience. So you do need to protect yourself, but apart from the extremes of identity theft, you need to be sure as well that, as we've talked about, that your brand is the brand that you want to project. And it's really not about being somebody you're not, but it's about projecting the best version of yourself. You on a really, really good day all the time is what you want online, not you falling over drunk, or you giving the worst speech you've ever given, or anything like that. So it's about protecting that and making sure that people see the good bits, because they'll always find ways of finding the bad bits, so you don't want to make it easy for them. So one of the things you can do, for example, is to buy a domain with your name, if it's not already been bought. If it's available, why not? A lot of domains cost almost nothing. You can buy some domains for £13 for 3 years. It's nothing. You can go to a domain provider and buy that domain and do absolutely nothing with it, but it's yours and nobody else can use it. Because somebody else might decide that that's a really great name to use and to then start putting a load of rubbish out over the internet, and it's got your name attached to it in the web address. So it's something worth considering. And then, of course, if you do want to have a website as well, you can use that domain. If you are interacting on social media platforms and you want to keep it very separate in terms of your friendships and what you're doing on a private level from what you're doing out in the open world and perhaps business networks, etc., consider using a nickname that's not your actual full name to interact socially with your friends, so that when people search for your full name, the name that you're putting on your LinkedIn profile, the name that's on your CV, the name that you're using for business, when people Google that name, they don't get all your private activity that's happening that perhaps isn't as private as you thought it would be. Privacy settings, I've got a couple of screenshots that I'll go through, but most sites will give you the option of setting certain privacy levels. It's entirely up to you how private you want to make it. As I mentioned before, I've got quite a public Facebook profile, but then I'm very careful about what I put out on there in terms of it is more of a business networking tool for me. If you are going to share some more private stuff, and certainly when my kids were younger, and if I wanted to share something about my kids when they were little, I would keep that much more private to a much tighter circle and set the privacy settings. So you've got to think about those things as well. What we talked about earlier, you know, people sharing their ultrasound photos and all of that. Where do you draw the line and who do you want to share that content with? It's a bit pointless now. They're 14 and 16. They share their own content. So I don't really need to protect photos of them being out and about on activities because they're posting their own. But when they were little, it was certainly a concern. So look at your privacy settings on various sites. In terms of preventing access to your platforms that you're using, you can use two-step authentication as well. A number of sites have their own way of doing that, and if you want to use it, then look at what they have in place. Google certainly has it, so you can actually ask Google to either text you a code, that's a 6-digit code that changes every single time you log onto a website. You can actually tell it that your computer is safe at home and it won't ask you for a period of time, but if you log on from anywhere else, it will request that code. You can also download an app onto your phone, that's the Google Authenticator app, and literally all you have to do then, you don't even have to wait for the text message, it's instant. As soon as you do the first step, which is your username and password, you then open the app and your 6-digit code is there, refreshed every time. Google authentication works on some other sites as well. So for example, WordPress as a blogging platform also gives you the option of two-step authentication via Google so that you can do that. So every time I log into one of my WordPress blogs, I have to have my phone with me, go onto the Google Authenticator app, and then it'll give me the extra code to get in. The reason for doing that is WordPress has been quite prone to being hacked. So it's worth bearing that in mind. So whenever that's available, consider whether you want to use that. Alternatively, or as well as, have really secure passwords. So make sure that you do follow those guidelines of having a mixture of capital and lowercase, having numbers, etc. And if sites allow you to, have it as long as you possibly can, because there are so many automated bots out there that will just search and mine sites for passwords. And if yours is easy to break, they'll be in. And if you've used it across all the sites, then they're in to all your profiles. Whereas if it's really difficult to break, the bots will try for a little while, can't get in, they'll move on to something else because it's a matter of seconds, they just churn them out. And then delete obsolete profiles. So as I mentioned earlier on, there was that profile from when I was doing a lot more on the presenting side of things. I don't think it's relevant anymore. I've gone in and I've deleted it. It's not negative stuff, but it confuses the message that you give out to people. So again, you can use all of those tools to find your deleted profiles, because sometimes you're likely to forget websites that you've registered with. Find those obsolete profiles and delete them. And there is a site called accountkiller.com, which is really useful. It lists a lot of the major sites. You can search for them alphabetically. It tells you how easy or difficult it is to delete your profile from there, and it gives you step-by-step instructions with links on how to actually do that so that you don't have to dig around, because some sites make it really difficult to find how to delete your profile. So accountkiller.com actually makes it a bit easier. They've done the work and they've put all the instructions on there. Accountkiller.com also has another little tool. Thought I'd put a little shark for you there. It goes out and kills things, but what it actually does specifically, it has a little bookmark that you can put onto your toolbar, and it's Account Killer Site Check. What that bookmark does is it sits on your toolbar, and when you go to register with a new site, you can press that little button, and it tells you whether, in its experience, that site is easy or not to delete yourself from later on. And it will come up with a little message. So I went onto a business directory at random there. I just Googled business directories, went onto one, clicked the AK Site Check bookmark, and it said, this site is blacklisted. You cannot delete your account. So it's up to you then what you do. But if you do create an account, bear in mind that at that point in time, as far as the site check site is concerned, there is no way to delete it. Once it's there, and it's there forever. So it's useful to know that, and equally there will be other sites where it says, yeah, we know how you can get off here, or it will say, we don't know on some of them, and you can submit sites as well for them to look at. So your Facebook privacy settings, there are tons of them, so I'll not go into massive detail, but to access them, you go to the little cog on the top right-hand side. It may be on the left by next week. It keeps moving and keeps changing. But the little cog with your settings, and as you move down the menu, you'll see that you've got a settings option there. So that's where you find them. And then it goes through, so the first thing that you can look at is your security settings. And it will literally go through whether you want secure browsing, whether you need approval before you log in from a different browser, which again keeps your account details secure. You can get security codes, a bit like the Google two-step authentication, and you can put trusted sites, etc. on there, so you can control an awful lot. And then it goes a step further, and you've got your privacy and your timeline and tagging. So your privacy is, what will it default to? When you post something on Facebook, will it be visible publicly, or will it be visible only to your friends, or only to certain groups of people, or even only to yourself? That's how far down you can go. And then what you can do is go into the settings for each individual post that you're putting out there and change those. So whatever your default is, you can still change it for individual post. And you can literally exclude specific individuals from certain posts, or make them visible only to certain individuals as well. But again, bear in mind that nothing you put out there is really private, because people can just take a screenshot. In terms of the tagging, it's an interesting one, because if somebody puts a photo of you or a video of you on YouTube, or say a photo on Facebook, you can prevent them from tagging you, but if you don't know that they've put that photo up there and you're not tagged in it, you won't even know that it's there. So there's only so much protection really that you have. If you do spot a photo of you that you don't want to be shown, you're perfectly within your rights to ask that person to take it down. And if they won't, then you can take that up with Facebook as well. But in the meantime, it's out there, and you might not even know. But you can at least exert a little bit of control by making sure that people have to get your permission before they tag you. So what will happen is, if they want to put a post up and tag you, in that post so that it's a link back to your profile, or if they want to put a photo up and tag you in that photo so that that photo essentially shows up as photos of you on your Facebook profile, you will get a notification that you've been tagged, and that tag won't actually take effect until you approve it. And if you don't approve it, then the photo will still be in there, your name will still be mentioned, but it won't actually be linked back to your profile. And I suppose you could then ask the person to take it down if you really wanted to. So that's been a real flyby overview of the branding of yourself and protecting of yourself, and also making sure that you establish yourself as an authority to help you secure future employment, to help you secure business deals, and things that you can use if you run your own business as well when you finish your course. We have got about half an hour, so I'm open to any questions, and I'll answer them as well as I possibly can. And I do have handouts for you as well with some of those links.
Most important, how the company can use social media as marketing.
Okay. How businesses can use social media, different social media tools, since they have been in since last 10 to 15 years, but companies basically do not find how to control them and how to find the feedback. Like they don't have a particular tool to measure the feedback, the response from these social media tools for their different marketing activities.
Yeah.
So what are the effective tools you can use?
Well, to some extent, most of what I've talked about from a personal brand point of view, you can use from a business brand point of view. So you can still use the Google alerts, you can still use all of the ways to establish authority, but the difference would be that, for example, if you looked at Facebook, you can have a Facebook business page. And in fact, you have to have a Facebook business page, otherwise you could get kicked out if you use a personal profile. And that allows you a lot more information, so it gives you insights into how your particular page is doing, into who's actually viewing it, well, not who's viewing it, but how many people, what times people are most active, etc., so that you can tailor your content, all of which you don't get when you're acting on a personal profile. The same goes for other platforms. So Twitter doesn't distinguish between personal and business, but you can create Twitter accounts in the name of the business, for example, so that you're propagating the business name. On LinkedIn, again, you have the personal profiles, which are the individuals within the business who still need to have that platform of authority, but then you can also set up a company page, and that company page can showcase your products and services, who the employees are. It can all be interlinked to the people that are actually working at that company who are also on LinkedIn. So there are lots of different ways that you can do that, and you get insights and analytics as well. And then the other side of it is actually the paid for advertising that you can do as a business. Quite often people think of social media as, oh, well, it's social and therefore I shouldn't have to pay to advertise. But actually you've got a captive audience there who are potentially interested in your topic if you do your research correctly and targeting correctly, which means that you can spend very, very little to be absolutely laser focused on who you want to target with your advertising. So people who are interested in particular topics, people who are already interacting with your competitors, etc. It used to be only on Facebook. Recently, Twitter, UK and Ireland have also brought in the platform. It was available in the US, but not over here. You can now advertise on Twitter as well in a very similar way. So you can say, for example, well, this group of people here are people who are followed by my target audience. So what Twitter will do is you can say, well, I want you to find a target audience that's similar to the followers of these people. So you put specific usernames in, and it will then look for similar followers and target those for you. You can target people who are interested in a particular TV program. You can target by the content that they're searching for, the content and keywords that they're talking about, etc. You can do that on LinkedIn to some extent as well, but the LinkedIn advertising platform I personally have never found to be quite as effective. It costs a lot more and doesn't seem to be quite as zoomed in, but you can target in different ways on LinkedIn. So you can target seniority level within industry, for example, size of company, etc. So there are lots of different options there as a business that you can use, but using the same principles that you would use as an individual. Does that help?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Again, security does matter in terms of businesses. You know, the competitor can get a lot of your company's information, your customers' information, customers' profiles, and they can directly, whoever wanted to get into that business, even as a new entry, they can easily have easy access to that information.
Yeah.
So how to avoid specifically in terms of business point of view? Is there any way or procedure you can avoid the company?
It's a bit of a gamble, really, and what you need to do as a business is to make sure that you're the company of choice that they will stay with. And when it comes to social media, that's about, rather than shouting messages at them and just putting loads of promotional stuff out, actually interacting with them. So running competitions where they can get something back, encouraging them to share your content, responding to things that they're posting. So making sure that you've got somebody who's dedicated and looking after your social media, so that if somebody posts a question on your Facebook page or on your Twitter account, it doesn't take 7 hours for them to get a response because you've been in a meeting. So having somebody that can respond straight away, 20 minutes is apparently the expectation people have on social media. People are very, very impatient. They want answers here and now, so if they're not getting them from you, they'll get them from somewhere else. So all of these things, there is no guarantee, but all you can do is be the business of choice. So get your business personality to come through. Give them a reason to keep coming back to your business rather than to go to the competitor. And part of that, it comes back to the good old adage that people buy from people. And there are people behind each and every business, so you need to keep that personal touch, you need to keep that interaction, and you need to make sure that there is that communication that goes both ways. It can't guarantee, because your competitors are probably doing exactly the same, but it's horses for courses, really, and there will be some people that relate better to your business than they do to somebody else's, and that's what you can then tap into, so that you're not trying to be everything to all people, but you're trying to be the best business choice for the customers that are your best target customers. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, quick question. Is it true that most people can only manage 2 social network sites on average? You're not the typical of that, so you can't use yourself. But most people have 2 that they actively manage.
In reality, yes, probably, and I will actually put myself in as an example, because I have flutter of activity in different ones and my priorities shift. And if you looked at the Google page results for page 1 for me there, looking at that, it's very, very obvious that although I'm still doing social media marketing training and I'm standing here doing this, I have been focusing an awful lot on the happiness speaking lately, and that's what's coming through on the internet, because you cannot possibly be everywhere all of the time. It becomes impossible. And yes, you can employ people to manage accounts, etc. But then if you do that, if they're external to your business, you need to make sure that they understand your business and the personality, and that they're using the right tone, etc. If it's your personal brand, then again, it's just being aware. To some extent, it doesn't matter that much, as long as there's nothing out there that you don't want people to see. If one particular aspect of what you're doing on social media to develop your personal brand is going a little bit dormant, but you're working on something else, and that's doing what you want it to do for you, then focus on that. So, but yes, you're right, more than 2, it starts to eat into your day an awful lot. So. Any other questions?
Frederic? Yeah. Sorry, Frederica, I have a question. What are the implications of having no digital footprint at all from a social media viewpoint?
You're invisible. So if you're talking about a business and somebody's looking for the product or the service that you offer and you have no digital footprint, then people won't come to you because they can't find you. When's the last time you've picked up a Yellow Pages or a phone book? People just don't. In fact, if my internet goes down for a couple of hours, I feel lost. How am I going to find information? Well, I used to find information perfectly well before the internet, but now we just don't. And of course, we've got whole generations that literally know nothing else. So if you're not online, if you haven't got a digital footprint, people won't find you. And from a personal point of view, that works exactly the same. People want to find out about you.
But what about from an employer's perspective? If an employer wants to do some research on a potential candidate and they find that they have very little digital footprint, what kind of implications or interpretations are there in that respect?
It would depend on the employer, I think. If you've got an employer who's not particularly internet savvy or interested in what's happening out there, or who thinks that the internet is evil and we shouldn't all be out there, then it's probably quite good if you don't have a massive digital footprint. If you want to go and work for the Ministry of Defence, it's probably very good if you don't have a massive digital footprint. So it really depends on the job that you're going to go out there and do. If you're going to be working in sales or marketing, I think it would be hugely detrimental, because they're going to think, well, how is this person going to promote themselves? They don't have a platform. How are they going to promote my business? If they don't have a platform, they don't have a following, they don't have a voice online. So it depends on the sector that you go into, and it depends on the individual employer.
This kind of connected to what I was talking earlier. Employers always talk about encouraging diversity and inclusivity and all that. And yet what we've seen today, which is largely true, I'm not in disagreement with what you're saying, it's just that it's not something I'm comfortable with, but it's the reality. But what we are seeing is the exact opposite of it, so isn't that a paradox? So essentially, it's just a myth, or they're trying to create that kind of an image, but in reality, they're looking at inclusivity, sort of like, not being different from every other brick in the wall. Yeah. So it's kind of a paradox again.
It's an interesting one, and I don't think I have an answer to that one, but you're right, of course, because if you're looking at employers, there are still quite a lot of people who are not comfortable with the internet, and who perhaps would prefer to be able to find a job in their local paper and that kind of thing. And technically, really, what you should do is advertise across all of those platforms as an employer to make sure that you're including people. You would need to make sure that your website is accessible to the visually impaired, that is accessible to those with auditory problems. So all of those things theoretically should be there. In reality, most people don't go to that extent because they haven't got the budgets to do that. Because to have a site that's going to give you different fonts and sizes, that's going to give you audio descriptions of what's on the website, etc., would cost an awful lot of money that most businesses unfortunately don't have.
I'm not talking about only that. Even within the set of, I'm talking about what people are looking for. They're saying that they, employers generally, they talk about wanting different kinds of people, people who are having different this one, and yet what you put on your LinkedIn profile, on your Facebook, as I said, it's kind of like it's perception management, and it's kind of a very rosy picture.
So what you're thinking about is we're all turning into Stepford wives, really. We're all
exactly
clones of each other, of the perfect.
Absolutely, employee. And that's the truth. I'm not disagreeing with what you said, because that's the absolute truth. It's just that do we as a society, I'm just throwing that have a responsibility, maybe some of us who are currently students, when we go out there and work as managers, to change this over a period of time. It's not going to happen overnight, but
I think so. And I think, like most things, you get technological developments, and again, I can't see into the future, but you get technological developments, and then something will happen and will shift because people are not happy with the direction it's taking. So that could well be the case. I also think that whilst we're talking about managing your profile and making sure that you present the best version of yourself, the best version of yourself doesn't have to be somebody who has no social life, who lives and breathes for work. It just has to be somebody that is going to be trustworthy as an employee and who's not going to do something that's specifically going to take the business into disrepute. So it's about really presenting yourself in the same way as you wouldn't go out on an interview, and if they say, right, well, after the interview, we're going to have a meal and we're going to have a few drinks, you don't then fall over drunk and dance on the table because you're in a social setting at the end of that interview. You would still behave in a professional manner. And it's that, really, that you're trying to make sure comes across online. But absolutely, and certainly when I've recruited people within my own business, I've wanted personalities and I've wanted people who had something about them and not just what they were about in terms of the job. I was looking at team fit, I was looking at how the personalities would get along. And actually, if employers then use social media to look at that, then it could be a positive because they're then looking for the different personalities that they can bring into the team and not just for somebody that's purely academic or purely business focused. So it could actually work in a positive. But again, it all depends on the individuals that are using that technology in the first place. Yeah.
Maybe it's time in the future, maybe 10 years, where the negative stuff won't be considered that important because there's going to be so much of it. At some point, people will, always just be negative.
Yeah. It's a tricky one, and I wish I had a crystal ball. I don't really know the answer to that, but it could go one of two ways, really, or it could be that people ignore the positive because they think it's just all veneer. And that we're actually just projecting the image we want people to see of us, and therefore, does any of it actually matter? But that's true. It's true. And actually, how many times, I've seen it so many times, these little posters that circulate on Facebook, and they apply, to anybody, I think, over the age of about 30, that say, thank goodness the internet wasn't around. Thank goodness there was no Facebook when I was at uni. I'm really glad there was no Facebook when I was at Bradford Uni. It's just not, and then it's not just there for your current employers and potential employers to see, but it's there for your children to see. It's there for generations, forever and ever. How would you stand up as a parent and tell your child not to go out and do certain things when they go, well, there's video evidence of you doing the same thing? So it is just one of those things, and as you say, make sure you don't get photographed or videoed.
Like that at Bradford every day.
I've become very good at deflecting the question. So when you were at uni, oh yes, changing the subject. I think there was somebody else there that had a question as well. Yeah. Hi. Oh, hang on. I can hear you, but
Hi.
the camera can't. Hi.
So you mentioned some really good examples of Richard Branson, and he's really good at using social media. I was just wondering, is there any big companies that is a bad example of using social media?
Oh yes, there are. Now then, there was, I'm thinking of an American clothing company, and I think they were actually called Aurora or something like that, and they actually used the Aurora shooting on Twitter to promote themselves on the same day. Which was a really horrible thing to do. And then there was another, it always seems to be clothing companies, and it might even have been Gap. It was a big one anyway, that used a hurricane in America to put out a tweet which they thought was quite humorous, which was in really poor taste, which is basically, while your house is collapsing around you and being taken over by a tornado, why don't you go online and shop for your next pair of Bermuda shorts or something? And it was just so inappropriate, and you think, who authorized that? Who actually looked at that? So there are some real blunders, and if you want to have a good laugh, there's certainly have a look online and just look for social media blunders, Twitter blunders, and there are tons of them. So there are lots of companies, big and small, who get it really, really wrong. And actually quite often, those are the big ones that you hear about, but you get the little businesses, and there's one local business in Doncaster, which I won't name, but I follow them simply because they keep giving me material to use in my workshops on how not to do things. So for a start, they're using a personal profile to promote their business on Facebook rather than having a business page, but they've named their personal profile with the name of their business. And the stuff that they put out, it's in horrifically bad English, it's swearing all the time, and it keeps talking in really derogatory terms about the area they live in, about their neighbours, about their children, about their neighbours' children, and so on. And I'm thinking, the last thing I would do would ever be to use their services because they're so terribly unprofessional. And there are a lot of people who do that. And unfortunately, that does filter up to larger companies as well, who do get it horribly wrong sometimes. Thank you very much. And also from me, thank you very, very much. You've made me feel very welcome, and it really has felt like coming home today. It's been lovely.